The storm arrived before the guests were ready for it. This was, in itself, not unusual for the North Yorkshire moors in November. The weather in that part of England has always operated on its own schedule, indifferent to human arrangement, and the moors in particular have a relationship with wind and rain that is not a relationship at all, but a simple fact of geography, the high, treeless ground offering nothing to slow the weather down, so that what arrives from the North Sea arrives in full force, without apology, and stays as long as it sees fit. What was unusual was that all 7 guests were already inside Harrogate Manor when the weather turned, which meant that the turning of the weather did not prevent them from coming. It prevented them from leaving. No one leaves Harrogate. This was what the housekeeper, Mrs. Rowe, said when Poirot asked her, at 9:30 on Friday evening, whether the road down to the village of Harrogate itself was passable. She said it with the flat certainty of a woman who has lived in this house for 31 years and has learned which statements require qualification and which do not. Not in this, she said. The lane floods at the bottom, near the gate. Once the water's in it, a motor car won't get through. It's 2 miles on foot over the moor if you wanted to walk it. In this wind, she looked at the window, where the rain was doing what it does in November on the moors, which is to say, it was doing everything it could. No one leaves Harrogate. Not tonight. Poirot looked at the window. He thought about the 7 people in the house, the host and his wife and 5 guests, all assembled for a weekend that had been arranged 2 months ago, and which had been, from the moment of Poirot's arrival that afternoon, something other than the pleasant country house gathering, it appeared. He thought about the man who had met him in the hall when he arrived, the host, Clement Harrow, 60 years old, the last of the Harrogate Harrows, who had taken Poirot's hand with a grip that communicated considerable anxiety in a very short pressure, and who had said, as he showed Poirot to his room, "I am glad you are here. I was beginning to think I had made a mistake, inviting everyone. I was beginning to think the weekend would happen before I could stop it." Poirot had asked him what he meant by that. Clement Harrow had looked at the corridor both ways, with the specific quality of a man checking whether they were observed, and said, "Someone in this house intends to kill me. I don't know who, I don't know when, I don't know how. I only know that the pattern is there, and I have been looking at it for 6 weeks, and I am certain." Then the gong had sounded for dinner, and Clement had straightened his jacket and gone downstairs. And now it was 9:30, and the storm had sealed the house, and Poirot was standing in the kitchen talking to the housekeeper about whether the lane was passable, which it was not, and thinking about a man who believed he was going to be killed and had invited a detective to witness it. He went back upstairs. He had work to do before morning. The drawing room at 9:30 had the quality of an English country house evening in late November, the fire well established, the lamps lit, the storm audible beyond the heavy curtains, the room doing what such rooms do in such conditions, containing, creating a warmth that was partly temperature and partly the accumulated comfort of a room that had been containing people against weather for 2 centuries. 6 people in the drawing room. Clement Harrow was not among them. He had excused himself after dinner, citing correspondence, and had not returned. His absence sat in the room in the way that hosts' absences sit noticeable, creating a slight redistribution of social energy, everyone slightly more conscious of it than they were of the presence of any individual person. Poirot stood near the fireplace and observed. Margaret Harrow, Clement's wife, was 55, a woman of considerable composure who had been, throughout dinner, performing the role of hostess with the efficiency of someone who has been doing it for 30 years and could do it in her sleep. She was handsome in the severe, architectural way of certain Yorkshire women, strong jaw, clear eyes, the physical quality of the landscape she had grown up in. She sat now in the chair nearest the door, which told Poirot something about her current state of mind. The nearest chair to the door is the chair of someone who wants the option of exit readily available. Adrian Crane was 45, Clement's business partner of 18 years in Harrow and Crane Engineering, a firm that had built its reputation on the specific, technically demanding work of industrial infrastructure in the north of England. He was a compact, precise man, with an engineer's habit of looking at things with the specific purpose of understanding how they worked. He sat at the writing table with a drink he was not drinking, doing nothing with his hands that involved the drink or the table, which meant he was thinking. Laura Crane, his wife, 42, sat across the room from her husband, not dramatically, not with the performance of a couple in overt conflict, but with the specific distance of two people who have been maintaining separate orbits for long enough that the separation has become structural. She was fair-haired, with the kind of face that had been very pretty in its 20s and had become, with age, more specific and more interesting. She was talking to the woman beside her with an animation that was slightly too bright. The woman she was talking to was Felicity Marsh, 38, who was described in Clement's introductions as an old friend from London, recently relocated to the north. She had the quality of someone who is very good at being interesting and who uses this quality the way other people use furniture deliberately, for support. Her dark hair, her mobile face, the wit with which she conducted any conversation she was in, all of it was genuine, and all of it was also, Poirot noticed, maintained with the consistency of someone for whom being engaging is a form of protection. On the other side of the room, near the window, stood Peter Doyle, 31 years old, the newest element in the group, who had been introduced as a colleague of Adrian Crane's, but who had the quality, at dinner and now here, of someone who is in a social group but not quite of it. He was young for this gathering, conspicuously young, and he was watching the room with eyes that were either observing it professionally or observing it because he was uncomfortable, and observation was his management strategy. And in the armchair by the fire, the best armchair, the warmest position, the chair of someone who has been in this room before and knows which chair is the best one, sat Nicholas Harrow, Clement's younger brother. He was 54, 6 years younger than Clement, and he had the Harrow look the same, strong jaw, the same northern solidity, but with a different quality overlaid on it. Where Clement's quality was anxiety, currently masked by composure, not entirely successfully, Nicholas's was ease. The ease of a man who is in his element, at home, in possession of territory, in his brother's house, at his brother's fire, in his brother's best chair. Poirot looked at Nicholas Harrow in his brother's best chair and thought, this one. Not for the first time this evening. He had thought it at dinner. He had thought it when he watched Nicholas Harrow receive the Harrow butter at the table, the heirloom silver butter dish that had been on this table for 3 generations, with the specific ease of a man touching what is his. Before dinner, Clement had given Poirot 15 minutes. They had stood in Clement's study on the first floor, a room that had the quality of a man's working space that had absorbed the anxiety of recent months. Papers slightly more disordered than a naturally orderly man would have them. A glass on the desk that had held brandy recently and not been cleared. The window facing the moor, showing the first advance of the storm in the darkening sky to the northeast. Clement had told it with the compressed efficiency of a man who has been rehearsing a story and is now delivering it under time pressure. 6 weeks ago, he had received a letter, not threatening, not the crude kind of threat that announces itself as threat. A letter from a solicitor in Harrogate, the town, not the house, informing him that a new appraisal of certain land parcels in the eastern section of the Harrogate estate had been requested by a party with potential interest in the estate's valuation. The letter was careful and legal and entirely normal in its language, and it had made Clement Harrow's blood run cold, because the only party with potential interest in the estate's valuation beyond Clement himself was Nicholas. Harrogate Manor and its estate had come to Clement through their father's will, which had been unambiguous, everything to the elder son, with Nicholas provided for through a separate financial settlement. Nicholas had accepted this at the time with the composure of a man who had grown up knowing what the arrangement would be. But in the 20 years since their father's death, the relationship between the brothers had changed in quality, if not in surface warmth. Nicholas had spent his settlement, had lived well, had made investments that had not performed, had come back to the manor regularly as welcome guest, as family, as the younger brother who always sat in the best chair and had watched the estate that had not come to him. The new appraisal request, Clement told Poirot, was connected to something he had discovered 3 weeks ago, his own will, the current version, which left the estate to Margaret with provision for Nicholas, had been accessed. His solicitor's office had been entered, not broken into, not obviously, and the specific files relating to Clement's estate planning had been reviewed by someone. His solicitor had noticed a discrepancy in the filing and had flagged it to Clement. Someone had been looking at Clement Harrow's will. "You believe Nicholas intends to kill you before you can change your will," Poirot said. "I believe Nicholas has discovered what my will currently says," Clement said, "and has made a calculation. If I die now under the current, will he receives a provision that is adequate, but not the estate. If I am known to be reconsidering the will which I am, because I have a new solicitor and new instructions in preparation, the calculation changes. The window closes." "What changed your will planning?" Clement looked at him steadily. "I found something," he said, "about the business, about Harrow and Crane, about Adrian Crane, and what he has been doing with the company's accounts for the last 4 years. He paused. "And about the connection between Adrian Crane's activities and my brother Nicholas." "They are working together," Poirot said. "I believe so. I have not been able to prove it. But the pattern—" He stopped. "I have spent 6 weeks looking at the pattern, and I am certain of the direction." "And this weekend," Poirot said, "you invited them both." "I invited them both because I wanted them in the same room, because I wanted to observe them together, with someone else who was watching, someone capable of seeing what I might miss." He looked at Poirot. "I invited you under the pretext of wanting your opinion on the Manor's architectural history. There is a question about the original building date that is genuinely disputed, and you have been consulted on such matters before. But you know why I really asked you." "I know," Poirot said. The gong had sounded. They had gone downstairs, and now it was 9:30, and the storm had arrived, and no one was leaving Harrowgate. Poirot spent the early part of Friday night in his room, which was the second-best guest room on the first floor, the best being given to Nicholas Harrow, a detail that Margaret Harrow had noted in her conversation at dinner, with a specific quality of silence after the noting. He sat in the chair by the window and looked at the storm on the moors, the darkness moving beyond the glass, the rain horizontal against it, the occasional sound of the wind doing something with a loose element of the house's extensive exterior that produced a periodic low percussion in the walls. He thought about patterns. Clement had told him there was a pattern. Clement had been looking at it for 6 weeks and was certain of its direction. The pattern, as Clement described it, pointed toward Adrian Crane and Nicholas Harrow operating in concert, with the Harrow and Crane engineering accounts as the mechanism. What Clement had found in the accounts was a series of transactions, not the obvious kind, not the crude redirections of a man who doesn't understand forensic accounting, but the sophisticated kind, payments to subcontractors who existed on paper and not elsewhere, invoices for work that was described in general terms and could not be specifically verified, a pattern of expenditure that was technically documentable but practically unauditable without sustained attention. The destination of the diverted funds was not established by Clement. He did not have the technical skills for it. What he had was the pattern of the diversion and the timing. It had begun, the accounting records suggested, approximately 2 years after Nicholas had exhausted his settlement, and the amounts involved were significant. Poirot thought about Adrian Crane at the writing table, his drink untouched, his hands still. The specific quality of a man, thinking not relaxing, thinking, and about the distance between Adrian and Laura Crane, which could be a marriage in a certain kind of difficulty, or could be something more specific. He thought about Peter Doyle, young, conspicuously so, a colleague of Adrian's who was at this particular house party in this particular November, when house parties at moorland manors are not casual social engagements. He thought about Felicity Marsh, the London friend, recently relocated to the north, engaging and animated in the way of someone using engagement as protection. What was she protecting? From what? He thought about Margaret Harrow in the chair nearest the door. He thought about Nicholas in the best armchair, and he thought about the drink. At dinner, Clement Harrow had had a glass of red wine and had drunk half of it before setting it down and not returning to it. Clement was not, as far as Poirot had observed, a man who left wine half drunk as a matter of course. He was a man of careful habits, and careful habits include finishing what you start. He had set the glass down after the third course. At that point, Nicholas had been leaning across the table in a conversation with Laura Crane, and Adrian Crane had been speaking to Margaret about something on his other side, and Peter Doyle had been looking at his own plate with the concentration of someone who was not concentrating on his food. Poirot had not been watching the glasses specifically at that moment. He had been watching the faces. Now, in his room at night, with the storm outside, he thought about the half-drunk glass of wine, and he thought about the fact that Clement had left dinner early, before the others, citing correspondence. And he thought about what correspondence could not wait until after a dinner that ended at 9. He got up and went to find Clement Harrow. The study was lit when Poirot reached the first floor. The light was visible under the door, a warm, steady light. The light of a lamp rather than the overhead. He knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. The door was not locked. He opened it. Clement Harrow was at his desk. He was seated upright in the desk chair with the papers before him, business papers, correspondence, a file that was open. He was in the specific position of a man who has been reading and has stopped reading. His face was wrong. Not in the obvious way, not the way that Poirot had seen in many rooms over many years of encountering the aftermath of violent acts. Clement was alive. Poirot established this quickly, crossing the room, checking pulse and breathing, with the practiced speed of a man who has needed these skills before. Alive, breathing, pulse present, but not conscious, and not simply asleep. His color was wrong. His breathing had a quality slightly irregular, slightly shallow, but present that was not the breathing of a sleeping man. On the desk beside his papers, a glass. A small glass with the residue of a drink, not wine, something else, a nightcap of some kind. Whiskey, from the smell. The glass was empty. Poirot did not touch the glass. He stood and looked at the room with the rapid, comprehensive attention of someone who needs to absorb a scene quickly and accurately. The papers before Clement were correspondence, business correspondence, with the Harrow and Crane letterhead. The open file was the same financial documentation Clement had referenced in his earlier account. He had been reviewing it when he had the nightcap. When someone had given him the nightcap, Poirot went to the door and looked into the corridor. Empty. The house was quiet at midnight. The guests had gone to their rooms. The storm continued its work outside. He went downstairs and found Mrs. Rowe in the kitchen. "Mr. Harrow," he said, "has he been unwell in recent months?" Mrs. Rowe looked at him with the specific look of a housekeeper who is deciding what a guest needs to know. "He has had some episodes," she said carefully. "Dizzy spells. Once last month he fell asleep at the dinner table. Dr. Burkitt from the village said it was fatigue. He's been working very hard." "Episodes," Poirot said. "Since when?" "Since," she thought. "Since September, I'd say. October was the worst." She paused. "Is something wrong?" "Mr. Harrow is in his study in a condition that is not sleep," Poirot said. "I need you to telephone the village for a doctor. Can the telephone line reach the village in this weather?" "The telephone is on a different line from the road," she said. "The line usually holds in storms." She was already moving. "And Mrs. Rowe," Poirot said. "Wake no one else yet. No one. Come directly to me when you have reached the doctor." She nodded and went. Poirot went back upstairs to the study and stood over Clement Harrow and thought about the episodes since September, and the half-drunk glass of wine at dinner, and the nightcap glass on the desk, and the specific progression of a plan that had been in operation. He now understood, not for 6 weeks, but for considerably longer. The doctor arrived at 6 in the morning, having driven 4 miles from the village in a vehicle robust enough for the flooded lane. Dr. Burkitt was 64, a country doctor of the old school who wore his competence like a practical garment, not displayed, simply in use. He examined Clement in the study, which Poirot had kept locked with Mrs. Rowe's key, and from which he had excluded everyone else, through the mechanism of being in it himself when anyone tried to enter. Nicholas Harrow had tried to enter at 1:30 in the morning, had come down the corridor with the specific quality of someone who knew the study would be lit and had intended to find it as he had left it. He found Poirot instead, standing in the doorway, and the quality of his response, a beat too long, managed but not instantly managed, told Poirot everything it needed to. "My brother," Nicholas said. "Is he—" "He is resting," Poirot said. He asked not to be disturbed. He smiled pleasantly. "Good night, Mr. Harrow." Nicholas had stood for a moment with an expression that was moving between things and had settled on neutral. "Good night," he had said, and gone back to his room. Dr. Burkett's examination was thorough. He worked for 40 minutes, consulting a small notebook he carried, asking questions of Poirot that Poirot answered, doing what doctors do when they are looking for something specific. "The episodes since September," Burkett said, when he had finished. "I diagnosed fatigue. I was wrong. Or rather, I was correct that the presentations were consistent with fatigue, and I had no reason to look for anything else. But this," he looked at Clement, who was now more responsive but not fully conscious. His color slightly improved, but his breathing still not entirely right. "This is not fatigue. The episodic nature of it, the timing, the presentation tonight, I think someone has been giving this man something." "Chloral hydrate," Poirot said. Burkett looked at him. "Possibly, or a related compound." Historically called knockout, drops a rather crude term for what is, in carefully managed doses, a sedative that produces episodes consistent with extreme fatigue, lightheadedness, occasional episodes of apparent sleep at inappropriate times. He paused. "In higher doses, it produces what we see tonight. In considerably higher doses, it kills," Poirot said. "In high doses, it can produce cardiac complications in a man of Clement's age and constitution, yes." Burkett looked at the whiskey glass. "That glass needs to be analyzed. I can take it to Harrogate. The hospital there has the facility." "Take it," Poirot said. "And take Clement as well, if he can be moved. In this weather—" "The storm has eased since 4 this morning," Poirot said. "The lane will clear. I need this man out of this house before the rest of the household is fully awake." Burkett looked at him. "You know who did this." "I know the direction," Poirot said. "I need the morning to establish the proof." They moved Clement at 7:30, wrapped in blankets, managed by Mrs. Rowe and Dr. Burkett, with the quiet efficiency of people doing something important before a house wakes up. Margaret Harrow was told she had been in her room, awake, and the sound of movement had reached her, and she came into the corridor, and Poirot had told her simply and completely, which was what she deserved. Her response was not the response of a woman who was surprised. It was the response of a woman who had been afraid for 6 weeks, and had just been told that the specific thing she was afraid of had happened and was being addressed. She was composed with the composure of someone for whom the worst has arrived, and the worst is, at least, now visible and containable, rather than formless and imminent. "He will be all right," she said. "Dr. Burkett believes so," Poirot said. "The dose tonight was high, but not—" He paused. "He will be monitored and treated, and he will recover." "And Nicholas," she said. "Nicholas is in his room," Poirot said. "He will remain there until I have spoken to him." She looked at him. "I have known, for 6 weeks, that something was wrong," she said. "Clement told me some of it, not all of it. He protected me from the worst of it because he thought he could manage it himself." She paused. "He could not. He brought me," Poirot said. "He brought you," she confirmed. "Thank God for that." Poirot went to Nicholas Harrow's room at 8 o'clock. He knocked. Nicholas opened the door with the expression of a man who had been awake since 1:30 and had spent the intervening hours in the specific activity of deciding which version of events to present. He was dressed not in the casual clothes of a man still waking, but in proper clothes, which told Poirot he had been making preparations of some kind. "Your brother has been taken to the hospital," Poirot said. "He will recover." Nicholas's expression did a very quick and very revealing set of adjustments before it settled into the correct performance of concerned fraternal anxiety. "The hospital? What happened?" "He was given a sedative compound in his nightcap," Poirot said. "In a dose significantly above what would be consistent with accident. This is consistent with a pattern of dosing that has been occurring since September and which I believe will be confirmed by the medical analysis of Mr. Harrow's blood and the analysis of the glass from his study." He looked at Nicholas with the steady, unaccusing quality of a man presenting facts. "The compound has been administered in small doses since September, small enough to produce episodes of apparent fatigue and dizziness, large enough to create a documented pattern of ill health that would, when Mr. Harrow finally died, provide context for a natural death conclusion," Nicholas said. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The pattern was careful," Poirot said. "Not crude. The doses were measured to avoid acute presentation to maintain the gradual deterioration of a man under business stress with a possible cardiac predisposition, Dr. Burkitt's diagnoses of fatigue were correct in the sense that fatigue is what the presentation indicated. What was wrong was the cause of the fatigue." He paused. "Tonight was different from the previous episodes. Tonight's dose was larger, more urgent. Nicholas's composure was holding. It was excellent composure, 30 years of practice." "Why would I?" he began. "The will," Poirot said. "Your brother had been in consultation with a new solicitor for 3 weeks. The new will, which had not yet been executed, made changes that significantly reduced your provision from the estate. The existing will, which someone had accessed through the solicitor's files, maintains the current arrangement. If Clement died before the new will was executed, the existing will stood." He paused. "You had been monitoring the situation. You knew the new will was imminent. This weekend represented a specific window." "You have no evidence of any of this," Nicholas said. "The glass will provide evidence of the compound," Poirot said. "The compound is a specific formulation, not something available from a pharmacy without prescription. Its acquisition will be traceable. The pattern of its administration, the specific dosing schedule that has produced the documented episodes since September, will be established through Clement's medical records, which Dr. Burkitt is reviewing this morning with new understanding." He paused. "And there is the financial connection." "What financial connection?" "Adrian Crane," Poirot said, "who has been diverting funds from Harrow and Crane engineering accounts for 4 years. Funds whose destination, I believe, has been traced by Clement to an account connected to you. Not directly, the structure is designed to prevent directness. But the pattern is there, as Clement described to me yesterday afternoon, and the pattern will be followed by the appropriate investigators." Nicholas looked at him. The composure was very good. But behind it, in the eyes of a man who has spent 30 years watching his brother live in the house that should have been his, sitting in the chairs of the life that had been arranged for someone else, there was something that was not composure. "He got everything," Nicholas said. It came out with a flatness that was more revealing than anger would have been, not a justification. A statement of fact as he had held it for 30 years. The house, the estate, the name. Everything our father built was given to him because he came first, because he was the elder. That is the only reason. Not merit, not character, order of birth. "Yes," Poirot said. "That is how these things often work." "I spent my settlement in 12 years, he said. "I was 26 years old when I received it, and I did not know how to manage it, and I spent it, and then I had nothing. And Clement had everything, and he was kind about it. He was always kind about it, which made it worse, not better, to be the recipient of a generous man's charity in what should have been your own home." "So you made an arrangement with Adrian Crane," Poirot said. "Adrian had his own grievances," Nicholas said. "Harrow and Crane, he built half of that business. Clement acknowledges it in principle and refuses it in practice. The accounts were, it was an adjustment, a correction of an inequity. The accounts were fraud, Poirot said, and the nightcap was attempted murder. Silence. I want to speak to a solicitor, Nicholas said. I expected nothing less, Poirot said. Chief Inspector Japp will arrive from Harrogate when the road is clear, which Dr. Burkett estimates will be by 10. In the meantime, I would ask you to remain in your room. Adrian Crane was in the breakfast room at 8:15, eating with the methodical, joyless efficiency of someone who knows that eating is necessary and is getting it done. He looked up when Poirot came in, and his expression had the quality that had been present since Friday evening. The expression of a man who has been waiting for something to happen and is monitoring whether it has. He had heard the sound of Clement being moved. He had been awake. He had not come out of his room, which was the behavior of a man who had made a decision about the appropriate posture for the morning and was maintaining it. Poirot sat across from him. He poured himself coffee. The accounts, Poirot said. 4 years. The specific structure, the subcontractor invoices, the general descriptions, the amounts. It is, technically, sophisticated, not the work of someone improvising. Adrian looked at him with the direct gaze of a man who is not going to pretend. How much does Clement know? He said. He knows the pattern, Poirot said. He does not yet have the full technical picture. The full technical picture will be established by the investigation that begins today. Today, Adrian said. Nicholas Harrow is in his room. Chief Inspector Japp will arrive before noon. Clement is in the hospital. He looked at Adrian steadily. The investigation will cover the business accounts, the connection between the diverted funds and Nicholas Harrow's finances, and the source and administration of the compound that has been given to Clement since September. Adrian set down his fork. I did not know about the compound, he said. Tell me what you knew, Poirot said. Adrian looked at his plate. He looked at the window the storm had reduced to the grey, heavy quality of a November morning, after a night's rain, the light flat, and even the moors visible as a low line of dark brown above the stone walls of the garden. I knew Nicholas intended to accelerate the situation, he said. His phrase. To accelerate the situation, he paused. I did not ask what that meant in practice. I chose not to ask, because asking would have given you knowledge that you preferred not to have, Poirot said. Because the arrangement suited me, and asking would have complicated the arrangement, Adrian said, with the specific honesty of a man who has decided that half-truth is worse than full truth at this point. I am not proud of this. What was your specific arrangement with Nicholas? He received 30% of the redirected funds, in exchange for managing the relationship with Clement, keeping Clement focused on the business rather than the accounts. Creating, when necessary, the distractions that prevented close scrutiny. You used your partner to protect your fraud, Poirot said. We used each other, Adrian said. I used Nicholas's relationship with Clement to provide cover. He used my access to the accounts to fund the lifestyle he needed to maintain. He paused. It was, I do not use the word partnership lightly. And Laura, Poirot said. Adrian was quiet. Laura knows about the accounts. She found out 8 months ago. She has said nothing because he stopped. Because leaving me would require her to give evidence, and she has not yet decided whether that is what she wants. It may no longer be a decision she can postpone, Poirot said. Adrian nodded once. A small, precise nod. The nod of a man who has been an engineer for 30 years and understands that structures, once their key element is removed, do not remain standing. What happens to the business? He said. The business, Poirot said, will survive in some form. That is not within my remit. What is within my remit is the truth about what happened here, and the truth is now established sufficiently for the authorities to proceed. He stood. I would suggest you speak to your wife before Japp arrives. Laura Crane was in the garden at 9 o'clock, standing in the November cold without a coat, looking at the moors, in the way that people sometimes need to stand outside without adequate protection, because the outside is less uncomfortable than the inside. Poirot brought her coat from the hall. He gave it to her without comment. and stood beside her. "You knew," she said. "About the accounts," Poirot said, "and that you knew. I found the discrepancies by accident," she said. "A bank statement in the wrong file. Adrian's system, which is usually impeccable, had one piece out of order. I looked at it trying to refile it, and—" She stopped. "You don't misread a pattern like that once you've seen it. You can't, even if you want to." She pulled the coat on. "I have been trying to decide what to do about it for 8 months. "That is a long time," Poirot said. "Long enough to understand that there is no good option," she said. "Whatever I do, something is destroyed. Adrian goes to prison, the business goes under. Clement and his employees face consequences they didn't cause." She looked at the Moors. "I have been telling myself there would be a moment when it became clear, when the right action would announce itself." "Has it announced itself?" Poirot said. "Clement was taken to hospital this morning," she said. "I heard the movement. I understood what it meant." She paused. "That is the announcement." Poirot was quiet for a moment. The November Moor was doing what November Moors do in the morning after a storm, breathing out a low, cold mist from the wet ground, the sky above a heavy grey-white, the air so clean it was almost sharp. "The truth will now proceed with or without your active cooperation," Poirot said. "But your active cooperation, your account of what you found, when, and what you understood from it will serve the process of justice more accurately than the same information reconstructed without you." He paused. "And it will serve your own position more precisely." She looked at him. "You are saying I should talk to Jap?" "I am saying it is the correct thing to do," Poirot said. "And that correctness, in this situation, happens also to serve your interests. Both things can be true." "Felicity," she said. "Does she—" "What does Miss Marsh know?" Poirot said. Laura was quiet for a moment. "Felicity came to the north because of Nicholas," she said. "Not as his, not romantically, as his person, his arranger. He uses people who are good at managing situations, and she is very good at it, and she knew the arrangement, and she managed the practical side of certain things." She paused. "She arranged the access to the solicitor's files. She has contacts in Harrogate, the town, in professional circles. She arranged the access quietly." She looked at Poirot. "She is not a good person, Felicity. She is charming and interesting, and she is not a good person." Poirot said nothing. "Is that a surprise to you?" Laura said. "No," Poirot said. "It is not." He left her in the garden and went to find Felicity Marsh. She was in the drawing room when he found her, the room that had the fire and the warmth and the best morning light, where she had established herself with a cup of coffee and the specific ease of someone making themselves comfortable in a house that is revealing, around them, its complications. She heard him come in and turned from the window with the full warmth of her social presence, the mobile face, the wit available, the specific quality of someone who makes engagement look effortless. Poirot sat down. He did not perform a return of warmth. He looked at her with the direct, patient attention of the grey cells in their investigative mode, not hostile, simply focused. She held the warmth for approximately 10 seconds. Then it shifted, not collapsed, shifted into something more specific and more real. "You know about the files," she said. "The solicitor's files," Poirot said. "The access to the estate planning documents, your contacts in professional Harrogate." He paused. "How long have you been working with Nicholas?" She was quiet for a moment. 3 years, she said. "He approached me through a mutual, through someone who knew us both. He needed someone with the specific skills I have." She said it without apology or self-flagellation, the specific flatness of honesty that is not confession but is beyond performance. "I have spent my adult life being useful to people in situations that require discretion, the legal side of certain things, the access that comes from knowing the right people in a professional community. Nicholas offered good money for specific work. The files were for the will information," Poirot said. "He needed to know the status of the current will, whether the provisions he expected were in place, whether Clement had made or was making changes." She paused. "He needed the window," the specific window between the current will and any revised version. And you gave him the window, Poirot said. I confirmed that a revised will was in preparation, she said. I did not know what use he was going to make of the information. She met Poirot's eyes with the directness of someone who has decided that this particular performance is over. I knew he was going to do something. I did not ask what. The question of how much I knew and when I knew it and what I should have done about it, that is a question I have been having with myself for several months. And what conclusion has the question produced? Poirot said. That I am in a situation from which there is no clean exit. She looked at her coffee. I have built my professional usefulness on the specific skill of creating situations in which people can do things without too much visibility. I am very good at it. I have been very well paid for it. And the specific skill, once applied to a situation of the kind Nicholas was managing, does not allow for the kind of clean exit that regret would prefer. No, Poirot said. It does not. What do you want from me? She said. The full account of what you did, when, and for whom, Poirot said. Given to Chief Inspector Japp when he arrives. He looked at her steadily. The specific nature of your involvement, the access to the files, the information provided, the contacts used will be established by the investigation regardless. Your account of it, given accurately and fully, shapes what the investigation concludes about your role and your intent. He paused. You are an intelligent woman. You understand the distinction between actively commissioning harm and providing information that was used to commit harm. Your solicitor will explain that distinction in detail. The quality of your cooperation will determine which side of that distinction the prosecution presents you as occupying. She was quiet for a moment. He was going to kill his brother, she said. I understood this eventually. Not when I took the work, I understood a man who wanted information about his position in a will. I understood that fully, and I did not consider it my moral responsibility. She looked at the window. When I understood the scope of what he was actually doing the compound, the timeline, I did not stop it. I told myself it was no longer my business. She paused. It was my business. I know that. Yes, Poirot said. It was. Chief Inspector Japp arrived at 11 o'clock, the lane having cleared sufficiently by 10 as the storm's floodwater drained, driving a police vehicle with 2 constables and the expression he always wore when arriving at a situation that had been managed by Poirot before his arrival. The combination of professional approval and personal indignation at having been the second on the scene. You had a full house, he said, standing in the entrance hall with his coat still on, looking at the brief account Poirot had written out for him over the last 2 hours. 7 guests and the household staff, Poirot said. The storm provided a contained environment for approximately 12 hours. He paused. Which was convenient for the investigation and was, I believe, also part of someone's calculation. The storm in November was a known risk on the moors, and a gathering that required the guests to stay the night provided the specific window needed for the final administration. The compound in the nightcap, Japp said. Confirmed by Dr. Burkitt's preliminary assessment this morning. The glass is with the hospital laboratory. The analysis will confirm the specific compound and the dosage. He paused. The episodes since September will be confirmed by Clement's blood work and medical history reviewed with this in mind. The compound has been administered in careful doses, small enough to maintain plausibility as fatigue, large enough to establish a pattern of ill health that would have provided context for a death conclusion of natural causes. Patient, Japp said. Very patient, Poirot agreed. 6 months of preparation, the business fraud providing the financial motive and the mechanism for Nicholas's involvement. The solicitor file access providing the specific intelligence about the will's status and the window's duration. The compound providing the physical mechanism. He paused. Every element was planned. The planning was the work of 2 people, Nicholas for the conception and the connection to Adrian Crane, Felicity Marsh for the specific operational intelligence and access. And Adrian Crane, Japp said. Adrian Crane is guilty of financial fraud over 4 years. Poirot said. His knowledge of the compound and the attempted murder is, as he has told it, the specific knowledge of a man who did not ask because not asking suited him. Whether that constitutes criminal liability in relation to the attempted murder is a question for the prosecution and the courts. His account is consistent, and he has offered full cooperation on the accounts. 4 people, Japp said. Nicholas, Crane, Marsh, and... He looked at the account. Peter Doyle. Peter Doyle, Poirot said, is 26 years old and is a junior engineer at Harrow and Crane, who was brought to this weekend by Adrian Crane for a specific reason that I have not yet fully established. He knows about the accounts. He is junior enough and close enough to Crane's operational decisions to have some knowledge. Whether he was here as a participant or as insurance, I need to speak to him. He looked toward the staircase. He has been in his room since I spoke to the household at 9. Go,